Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andy Jordan, the President of Rafenzian Consulting in Ontario, Canada, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And in just a moment I'm going to introduce our two speakers to you, but before we start, just a couple of brief admin things. We do have a very, very large attendance today, so I apologize in advance if we don't get to all of the questions, but we are going to make sure that there's some time at the end of the presentation to try and get through questions. So if you do have any as we're going through, please feel free to type them into your chat window, and I see some of you have already started asking questions, so that's great. We will get to as many as we can, and we'll make sure that any we can't cover live on this webinar we send to Steve and Rich afterwards. This webinar will also be recorded, so if you do have to step away for a moment, or if you want some of your colleagues to hear it afterwards, you'll be getting a link within about 24 hours at the end of this webinar with details of how to access the recording. In addition, there will be a PDU that is available for this webinar, and I'll give you a little bit more information on that at the end. The audio is through your computer speakers or headset, so if you're having any challenge with that, just check that everything is working okay at your end. We don't have any problems from our standpoint. All right, so let me introduce our speakers. First off, Steve Maynard, Dr. Steve Maynard. Steve is an executive coach and a lean agile evangelist with a passion for cultivating transformational leaders and high-performing teams. His 28-year career in business includes roles as Vice President in multiple Fortune 500 companies, as well as Chief Technology Officer for an internet startup. Steve launched the first government implementation of SAFE, which led to the successful turnaround of a large mission-critical Department of Homeland Security program. As a SAFE Senior Program Consultant Trainer, SPCT4 for Scaled Agile Inc., Steve is using his experience as an innovator, strategist, and servant leader to help the largest enterprises around the world implement lean agile at scale. Steve will be speaking in just a moment, but our first speaker is Richard Knasta. So Richard has over 25 years experience in software development in roles ranging from developer to executive, and he's been involved in Agile for well over a decade. Rich is a principal contributor to the Scaled Agile framework and is a SAFE Fellow and Principal Consultant at Scaled Agile Inc. Rich is a certified IBM Thought Leader and Open Group Distinguished IT Specialist. He's also a certified SBCT, PSM, PMI Agile Certified Practitioner, a PMP, and a contributor to the PMI Portfolio and Program Management Standards. It's no wonder so many of you are here to hear Steve and Rich today. So Rich, without any further ado, take it away.
Thank you, Andy, and appreciate all that background on this. I'll add one more thing. Steve and I have been both PMPs and PMI ACPs for almost 2 decades, and the knowledge and education that we received from the PMI has been critical to our career and business success. Both Steve and I have made the transition to developing software and systems for Agile approaches for over 15 years. So we wanted this opportunity to give back to the community by doing a presentation on the opportunities there are for project managers in the lean agile enterprise, especially with all the trend towards agile approaches for developing software and systems. We thought this would be great to share our learnings with you. So we've got a pretty packed agenda, as you can see today, and we're going to start with why SAFE and the reasons for adopting it. Then we're going to do a brief overview of SAFE and provide the context for the opportunities for project managers. We'll talk about the shift from the traditional to agile mindset, and we'll talk about how SAFE handles 5 of the 9 PMI core processes. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all 9. Then we'll discuss opportunities for project managers in a lean agile enterprise like SAFE. And at the end, we'll talk about learning more. And Steve and I will be going back and forth in terms of the presentation today. And I'm really honored to be presenting with Steve, who is an SBCT and senior consultant. So before we begin, Andy, you're going to take us through a quick poll so we can understand people's knowledge of the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to launch this for everybody now, and you should see it appear over the top of your presentation screen. As you can see, it's just a very simple question on your knowledge of SAFE. So if you just take a little bit of time and spend a few seconds answering that, and we'll share those findings with Steve and Rich, and then they'll be able to adapt the presentation to your needs. So Rich, we're getting some votes coming in. We're getting quite a few people voting already, so I can cheat a little bit and see what the results are, but what do you think we're going to see? Are we going to have a bunch of experts here, or are we going to have a bunch of people who aren't quite sure about SAFe yet?
How's it trending, Andy?
It's starting to look as if we've got a lot of people who need to hear your.
Andy, did we just lose your audio?
The results there. Do you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. So I've just shared the results with everybody. 34% of people saying very little to no experience. 32% of people are saying they've got some experience. We have 18% experienced, 13% very experienced, and we have 4% of the audience who consider themselves experts on SAFe. So that's probably pretty much what you're expecting, Rich.
Yes, pretty much is that what Steve and I were expecting, that the audience wouldn't have a great knowledge of SAFe at this point. So this is really good information for us, and will also help us guide us for any future presentations. And we'll be having 2 polls at the end as well.
All right, so I'm going to close this.
Okay.
There you go. It's back to you. You've got the slides.
Thank you, Andy. That was great. So why SAFe? That's a question most of us may be asking here today. Well, let's face it, a lot of the challenges that we're facing today have been around for a long time, for at least the 30 years or so that I've been involved in project management. And these not only apply to traditional approaches, but they also apply to Agile approaches, from things like late delivery of our solutions to too much complexity and dependencies to poor morale. I'm sure you can all relate to some of these challenges here as project managers. The problem is that compounds this is that enterprises can't keep pace. What's happening is that business innovation is increasingly being delivered by software and systems. Those are, in effect, the modern fabric of all of our products and services today. It includes software and systems. And although Agile has produced better business results, it was developed for small co-located teams. And Agile methods alone don't address the top-down concerns of things like business strategy, as Agile teams really work bottoms up. The climate that we're in today is really fast-paced, and businesses must rapidly adapt to advances in technology to maintain a competitive edge. I think you can all remember companies like Blockbuster, Kodak, Tower Records, Palm Computing, Nokia, Compaq, and many more. What these all iconic market leaders had in common is that they couldn't adapt to the new business models and technology innovations ahead of their competitors. And this quote here is pretty scary. Since 2000, 52% of the names, 52% of the names on the Fortune 100 list are gone, either a result of mergers, acquisitions, or bankruptcies. So the need to adapt has gotten much more critical in today's climate. So next, Steve is going to bring you through a brief overview of SAFe.
All right, great. Hey, thanks, Rich, for that great intro. Given that backdrop of what's happening in the business environment and the dynamics and rapid change, it's not surprising that the fact that Agile was focused at small teams really ran into some issues when some of the largest companies in the world started looking to how they could implement Agile and Lean in organizations developing very complex projects involving hundreds, thousands even practitioners working together. And it's into that vacuum that the Scaled Agile framework was born. And SAFE is the sort of the shorthand acronym for the Scaled Agile framework. It's basically a body of knowledge. It's similar to PMBOK in that it represents a collection of success patterns that we've developed over a number of years that helps very large enterprises implement lean and agile practices. And this knowledge base reflects inputs from some of these largest companies in the world that have actually implemented SAFE and given us their feedback of how it's working in the real world. So just in brief, if you go to the scaledagileFramework.com link that you see there, you'll get a picture that looks like this. And it's in essence a visual map to the knowledge base. Click on any of the icons and words and it'll give you articles that are hyperlinked across the knowledge base, and you can learn more about the details of the framework if you go to that website. Next slide, please. I mentioned that these were practices that were really rooted in two different bodies of knowledge. First is the body of knowledge around lean, and of course we know lean's been around for decades, born out of the 1940s, Taiichi Ohno, the Toyota Way. We're all pretty familiar with that. And you'll see themes of lean throughout the Scaled Agile framework, but it's also fully founded in the Agile Manifesto, which has been around since 2001, has been very successful in providing guidance for developers all over the world on how to better and more iteratively develop complex integrated software and systems. Next slide, please. What we've learned at Scaled Agile is that when companies take these same practices and values and principles and try to implement that very large scale, that there are some additional patterns, some common principles to do that successfully that have emerged. We're not going to cover all these in this presentation, but just want to let you know that if you go to that link, scaledagileFramework.com, at the bottom, there's a whole article specifically on these principles that will expose those to you a little bit more. Next slide, please. And then just as a backdrop to get a sense of the kind of momentum that SAFE is having in the marketplace, we're seeing SAFE being adopted in 70% of the Fortune 100, a good global presence of large companies in 35 different countries around the world, and really kind of very kind of humbling for us as a company. We've now seen over 120,000 people around the world take one of our various SAFE classes we'll talk about at the end of the presentation. So the momentum is great, and it's great because it's getting results, and we'll talk more about those results toward the end. And with that, I'll hand it back to Rich, and he'll take us through the sort of the foundation of the shift that we're seeing in the marketplace. Rich?
Thanks, Steve. So we're going to talk about the shift from a traditional to a lean agile mindset. And there are a lot of different patterns which there are different between traditional and lean, and I'm just going to point out a few. One is on a leadership model, and that is in traditional, typically we have a command and control type of transactional leadership. As opposed to in lean and agile, we have self-organizing, self-managing teams who are decentralized and empowered. And the knowledge workers today work best when they have autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and are being led using a servant leadership style. The work planning is much different in traditional than agile. We have detailed project plans which are developed up front. And often when we are doing research and development projects like software and systems, we don't really know much about the product or service that we're going to be developing. So we need to use a more empirical approach. So we use things like a backlog. We use epics, which are a very large initiative. We look at roadmaps to look out at the next 3 to 4 time boxes, which we call program increments, and we work in a continuous flow type of method. In traditional, often people are multiplexing across projects. They're 10% on one project, 25% on another project, 50% on another project, often due to the way that projects are funded from different cost centers. In SAFE, we have dedicated teams, and they are long-lived and stable. And instead of bringing people to the work, like under traditional, the work is brought to the teams. And I just want to make an important point here, and that is a lot of the things today I'm saying are generalities. So in some cases, some of the things that apply to lean also apply to traditional. But again, we're just having some generalities about the differences between the two. Another important point is about quality. We typically inspect quality in the end when the product is delivered. In Lean Agile, what we try to do is, in SAFE especially, is to build quality in. We use built-in quality practices to develop incrementally and getting feedback after each increment, which is every 2 weeks. And that rapid feedback helps us learn and then be able to better manage uncertainty in the world of software and systems development. So another important point here, we all are familiar with the iron triangle. And as you can see, in traditional, the plan drives the cost and schedule estimates. We have a fixed scope, and we put that scope into our project plans. We figure out what our critical path is, and then the plan creates the cost and schedule estimates. In Agile, it's a bit different. Notice the triangle has been flipped. So the constraints, or the things which are fixed, is cost and schedule, and the business lets us know when they need something, and that's what drives the plan. The vision, and when we need to implement the vision, is how the plan is driven, and we'll fit as much work into that time box as we can deliver. So the mantra here is fixed time and quality, but not scope. So those are some of the big differences between Lean and Agile in general. The other thing is from a project management style. What style do you use as a project manager? And of course, you could be a servant leader as a traditional project manager, but in Lean and Agile, it's much more important because the role goes away from day-to-day task direction to coaching an entire team or team of Agile teams, which we call an Agile Release Train, to collaborate. And often the project manager is providing a lot of the answers. They usually have deep domain expertise, deep knowledge of developing software and systems, where we want the teams to be invested in the solution by finding out the answers themselves. So we go from a directing style to teams figuring out the answers and managing themselves, as well as how they organize. We also, in Lean and Agile, focus on facilitating problem solving as a Lean Agile leader. So we want to make sure that the teams can solve their own problems and they have the tools to use to be able to do problem solving. And again, this is not all just things that are in the Lean Agile domain. For example, we use Ishikawa diagrams or fishbone diagrams, as they're called, for that problem solving. So a lot of these things will be familiar to you with the skills that you picked up as a project manager. So next, I'm going to turn this over to Steve, and who's going to talk about how SAFE handles 5 of the 9 PMI core knowledge areas.
Thanks, Rich. So, appreciate that great overview of the comparison between traditional Lean Agile management approaches. So now we're going to take a deeper dive and look more specifically at how SAFE addresses some core PI knowledge areas using Lean Agile practices. And again, we're going to focus on 5, and we're going to begin with scope management. So we put scope management first because, as Rich has already shared, in SAFE, we work in set time boxes using long-lived, stable teams. So in the iron triangle, that means we fix our time and cost, and the scope is variable. So it's important to understand how do we manage scope and manage that variability in SAFE. And then after this, then Rich will take us through the time and cost pieces of that equation. So let's take a look at another side-by-side comparison, this time contrasting traditional scope management to how we accomplish the same goal in Lean Agile at scale. The key mindset shift to understand here is that decades of software and systems development practice have proven we simply can't know all of the detailed scope up front. Our project teams can't, and frankly our customers can't either, because the dynamics in our market are too variant and the cone of uncertainty is too wide. In Lean Agile, the scope is not a one-time upfront document. It's more of an ongoing and iterative process to take a high-level vision and roadmap and then use rolling wave planning to scope what we call program increments, which are typically 8 to 12 weeks in length. And the scope for these increments are defined in greater and greater detail as we move forward. And at the end of the increment, the actual delivery of working software and systems will be used to recalibrate the highest value features to deliver in the next increment. This should be pretty familiar to most of the folks on the call because rolling wave planning is something that's been present in PMBOK for quite some time. Next slide. Now, there are many creative practices that we've seen customers use to clearly articulate and define that vision and roadmap for development effort, from professionally produced videos to very simple postcard from the future exercises like we see described by Heath and Heath in their book, Switch. The distinction in SAFE is, there's a couple. Rolling waves in SAFE, each wave is fixed and consistent. Each wave is not variable, so we know if we're using, for instance, 3-month waves, that time box is going to happen very consistently 3 months after 3 months after 3 months. So that's one difference. The second difference in SAFE is that we're focused on committing to only the most immediate increment or the most immediate wave, because that's what we have the greatest knowledge about. And the next 2 increments in the forecast reflect our belief of what the most valuable features to be developed next might be, but we will revalidate that once we finish the current increment and do the planning for the next increment, which means as a forecast, it's subject to change based on validated learning gathered from the current increment. Next slide, please. So in SAFE, the way that we create that alignment and that clarity around the scope that will realize the vision as part of a given increment is with what we call program increment planning, which is sometimes referred to as big room planning. In the spirit of Agile's focus on individuals and interactions, those face-to-face collaborations, we've found that this is the most effective and compressed way to get alignment around the right amount of scope, including consideration of risk and dependencies, when you have multiple teams working together to build an integrated solution on a large development program. Next slide. Now, this idea of decomposing very large development efforts from a high-level objective down to individual executable items is also not new in the PMI world. The difference to understand is that in Lean Agile, we're not decomposing tasks or the effort. Instead, we're decomposing the product from a large description of the macro definition of the product into smaller and smaller deliverables until the unit of working product are small enough for a team on the program to deliver those multiple small increments of product we call stories within a single 2-week iteration of effort. This allows for fast feedback from the customer or from someone who's being a proxy for the customer voice, so that any errors or misalignment of the vision and direction for the product are found and they are corrected fast. Next slide, please. In large programs, the efforts of these individual teams must also be integrated back together so that we see the whole system developed incrementally. And to address the need to integrate frequently and SAFE, we have all the teams on the program integrate continuously if possible, but at least every 2 weeks, so that we implement the concept of failing fast but also fixing fast, while focusing on proving value delivery and scope completion through working software so that can be physically validated. And we also demo at a higher aggregate level at the program and even higher levels when we're integrating multiple programs together into very complex solutions. We still demo that at the boundaries of every program increment. So every 8 to 12 weeks, we're demonstrating integrated working software. So that's, in a nutshell, in a very compressed time, how we plan and manage scope based on validated actual delivery of working product. So Rich, why don't you take us now through time and cost management?
Thanks, Steve. That was a great overview of scope management for SAFE. So let's now discuss time management. And I love this quote from Mary and Tom Popendick. A predictable organization does not guess about the future and call it a plan. It develops the capacity to rapidly respond to the future as it unfolds. And this is true more than ever today. We really need to be able to respond to changes and be able to adapt our plans to the future as it unfolds. So here's another side-by-side comparison. When we are determining the schedule in traditional, typically what we do is we create all of the tasks in the project plan, we determine what the critical path is, and that drives scope and cost estimates. As opposed to the lean agile approach is that the people in the business, they determine the schedule based on market needs. They tell us we need a solution within 3 months or 6 months or whatever that time frame may be. And then it's R&D's job, or IT, if you're in an organization like that, they determine how much work can be done within that fixed time box, or what Steve called earlier a program increment. The milestones are mainly driven by the critical path and phase gates. The milestones get pushed out as there are slippages in the schedule or as we learn more information, because we all know there's an inherent uncertainty in software and systems development. Whereas in SAFE, we have fixed time boxes. So our Agile Release Train, which is a team of teams, works within a program increment. Within a program increment, there are multiple iterations, and these are all fixed lengths. So we're never going to go over our time box. The time box is over when that increment of time is done. So we have to fit the amount of work into that time box. So it's a different way of looking at things. In the traditional approach, our dependencies are used to determine critical path. And often when we're thinking about dependencies, we are thinking about how that we have to wait for one group to be done before another group can begin. Instead, let's think of dependencies as opportunities for collaboration. And let's not wait. If we have two teams that need to work together, let's have them do it in pairs at the same time. So we're not delaying the work and finding out our learning as we go along. So it's a much different approach to dependency management. And we use a program board to manage our dependencies between teams. And so that's not quite like a PERT chart, but it just shows the dependencies between features and other work items in the system. So in terms of our managing our time, we use two concepts. One is called cadence, and the other is called synchronization. An example of cadence is that we have our iterations every 2 weeks, and they're fixed. And our PI lengths is between 8 and 12 weeks. Normally you pick a time period, let's say 10 weeks is our default, and then you would have 5 iterations. So the time box between the start and end increment is predictable. We know that that period of time is going to be 10 weeks every single time. We know iterations are going to be every 2 weeks. Therefore, we can organize events around these predictable time periods in order to make sure that they happen, and it's more cost effective. So example, at the end of every iteration, we will have a team demo, and we will also use synchronization to take all the work from all the teams who have done demos into a single demo that we call a system demo, which allows us to integrate the code and make sure that we discover problems early on and not have late integration problems which are only discovered at the end. So by using cadence and synchronization, two things happen. One, things which aren't predictable can become predictable events. So we know when we're going to do our planning, we're going to know when we do our retrospectives, we're going to know when we do our demos, and then synchronize. We know when we're going to synchronize, we're going to do that every 2 weeks and at the very end of our program increment. And that allows us to have our trains work in a way that they are working all together instead of as individual contributing teams. Next, I'm going to speak about cost management. And one of the big problems we have cost management is that when we're developing software agilely, our traditional cost accounting practices don't really help us much. In fact, they get in the way. So here's another side-by-side comparison. So one of the things that we focus on in traditional is that the plan, from there we can derive what our resource needs and costs are. But in reality, as we all know, things change. And when we have people partially allocated, often we get partial results. In SAFE, we're we're budgeting on a fixed basis. So we know how many people we're going to have for a particular program increment, and that will stay stable over time, but it can still be adjusted, let's say, every 2 PIs. So instead of budgeting to a project, we're going to budget using Lean Agile methods, and we're going to fund value streams which contain Agile release trains, which are teams of teams. And by funding the train, that allows us to have predictable spending and cost over long periods of time. In traditional, we focus on resource utilization. In fact, often people are being allocated near 100% resource utilization. And that is often a result of the way that we are doing our funding. We have people working for different cost centers, different functional managers, and they must be allocated to different projects, as opposed to having a focus on throughput of value and reducing delays caused by having to assign people to a project. Instead, with SAFE, the teams stay together for long periods of time, and the teams self-organize and they pull the work that they're going to work on next. So they don't have to have work assigned to them by a resource manager. Instead of focusing on preventing change or on change control, as you know, in Agile, we focus on welcoming changes. And we manage cost by working on the most valuable work first. Oftentimes, we are trying to show progress on a traditional project, and we'll work on the things which are easy to do. However, if we run out of funding, we're in big trouble. So it's really important to focus on doing the most valuable things first. There's a lot of other things that we get when we use Lean and Agile budgeting. But let's look at some of the things that we do in traditional. So projects are the basic unit of work. As I mentioned earlier, people are brought to the work. When a project is over, the people are disbanded. When we start a new project, we have all the cost of forming that new project team. And then we're measuring compliance to a plan for a product that's never been built before. So of course, our guesses are going to be wrong. So in software and systems, it doesn't make too much sense to be complying to a schedule and to a plan and cost that could change based upon our learning. So that results in higher overhead. It results in the blame game, finger pointing, and there's less focus on throughput as there is on making sure that everyone is fully allocated and has work. We can achieve full control of the spend by budgeting to an Agile release train or which work in value streams. And we know how many people are going to be on that train, and that stays stable for at least 2 program increments. And the focus is not on resource utilization, but on flow. How do we get a fast flow of value through the system? And because we're empowering teams to be able to be self-organizing and self-managing and to be truly empowered results in higher morale. And the work is brought to the teams where they can pull the work instead of the work being pushed to them. And we call this Beyond Project Cost Accounting with SAFE. I'm sure you've heard of Beyond Cost Accounting, but now we've applied this with SAFE. And our fitness for use is based upon objective evidence of that, based upon working software. Often when we're developing traditional projects, we find that we need to spend more time on a particular feature. And there are often delays as a result of that. In order to we have to get permission or approval to spend more time on a particular feature. And that often results in costly delays. And we have to wait for that approval before we continue working on that feature. However, if our costs are fixed for a program increment, the fact that we delay a feature does not affect our overall cost. We may have to flex on our scope, but that's okay. That's what Agile is about. We fix the time and cost, and we float the scope. You know, the business also needs to know how to forecast. And so we can provide predictability in our delivery of our software because we're working in fixed time boxes. And those fixed time boxes are also give us an opportunity to make adjustments to our budgets. So in the very first value stream, which represents a product or service, that's where Agile release trains live, after 2 PIs, program increments, we decided that we can move some of the funding to another train or to perhaps another value stream. So we can dynamically adjust these budgets, but staying in with the overall annual budget. And that gives us a lot of freedom to move people from one value stream to another, or to move people from one Agile release train to another, because the business still needs that predictability. And in fact, we get more predictability with a lean Agile approach than we do in most traditional approaches. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about quality management.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. That's great stuff. So obviously we have to have sound management of scope and time and cost, our normal triangle elements. But we also know, even in the historical traditional approach, that we have to also make sure that what we are developing is of the highest quality. And that is especially true in a lean Agile environment, because we're delivering even more quickly. And I love this quote that's on the slide. And I think across the board, it's pretty well known and accepted by now that inspection at the end is not the way we improve quality. It's not the way we guarantee quality. For inspecting at the end, it's just too late. So clearly what we need to do is understand how we build quality in instead of inspecting it in. Next slide. So let's look at how SAFe does that. So when we're taking a lean Agile approach, the focus is to build quality in incrementally and get rapid feedback cycles. So as you can see in this comparison, the key is to build quality in and instead of waiting for a testing phase at the end of a project. And SAFe supports these highly proven quality practices that we've had now even before Agile. Extreme programming is a body of knowledge that has been talking about how to improve the quality of our software development practices for some time. We're going to do things like embedding both testers and developers in cross-functional Agile teams. So they're working together, and we, in some practices, will even start by thinking of the test before we build the code that is going to be validated by the test. And that's how we build and can validate the quality of our product. The other thing is test automation and continuous integration and frequent demonstrations. These are the practices that when we're working in that environment, any errors are really driven out very early in the process. And because we're doing small pieces, it's so much easier to find where there's a problem in a small piece of software or a small piece of a system, rather than waiting until we've got very large, thousands and thousands of lines of code or very large, pieces of systems, and then finding where errors are happening or what the implications and dependencies of those errors are throughout the system becomes much more complex, harder to find and fix, and also introduces a lot of delay. So this idea of building quality in and having the people who have those disciplines of development and quality assurance working together, and then validating their work through demonstrations and through testing is really the key to quality management in a lean Agile approach. Next slide, please. And as I said before, building that in is exponentially more critical when you're building large, highly complex software systems, cyber-physical systems. Bad code or flaky hardware just does not scale. So getting it right from the beginning and being able to quickly regression test everything continuously as new features are being added is absolutely critical to building really big systems. Next slide. So that's a very quick pass at quality. Quality is absolutely a given, and we have to follow the best practices to make sure that we're building it in along the way. We also touch quickly on our fifth and final knowledge area, which is risk management. So it is important to also deal with managing risk in these bigger systems, because those bigger systems are bigger bets and they have bigger risks, and the implications can, in some cases, some of our customers that are dealing with health systems or flight systems, I mean, the issues could be the safety and economic implications of failure are just too big. So we have to constantly embed the risk management in a way that also allows us to constantly innovate. So next slide. So here we go, one more side-by-side comparison. So we've all know how we have been taught to do risk management. Historically, we have a whole risk management discipline. We build these complex risk management plans. And I don't know about you, Rich, or for the folks on the phone, but so many projects and programs I was involved in over my career, all that effort ended up being embedded in these documents that were in some file system, and down at the team level, we hardly ever saw them, and so they really weren't useful tools to us who were on the front lines trying to build these systems in a way that helped effectively manage risk. So we take a very different approach. It's a shift from risk management being this upfront document-based process to an ongoing, continuous process that is very dynamic and it's constantly reevaluated. And more importantly, it's not just the responsibility of a project manager or maybe even a risk manager to have the responsibility for that. It really becomes everybody's responsibility at every level, at the team level, the program management level, all the way up to the senior levels of the organization. So we have different processes and pieces, and I'll show, yeah, good, next slide, show you some of the things we do to manage that. One of the tools we use is, and there's lots of ways, lots of metaphors for this, we use the ROAM method in our PI, or Program Increment Planning. It stands for Resolve, Own, Accepted, Mitigated, just a classification for understanding our risks. And the teams themselves are involved in identifying, escalating, and even managing these risks throughout the program increment. So in PI planning, we identify and categorize the risks, make sure that those that need to be owned, that we know who owns those risks. And then as we move through the execution, we're meeting at least a couple of times a week, and the leaders across the program in something we call Scrum of Scrums. And part of that activity is always a revisit of the items that are on our risk board to see, are they still risks? Have they been mitigated? Are we past them? And it creates that visibility and total across the board ownership by everyone on the train for managing risks. Next slide. So this rapid iterative development model it really does contribute to risk management, because through rapid learning and delivery of the smaller pieces of working software and systems, that more quickly drives risks into the open so they can be addressed, they can be planned for, and they can be managed based on validated learning and a comprehensive ongoing testing of the system as it evolves. So smaller incremental delivery actually helps facilitate better risk management. Next slide, please. The other key element to successful risk management in Lean Agile is how we actually organize. So in a Lean Agile environment at scale, we're not only building cross-functional teams, so on a team we've got developers and testers and so forth, but in an overall program, a team of teams, we bring all the disciplines in that are part of the ecosystem of value creation and delivery. And by having everybody working cooperatively in this virtual program we call the Agile Release Train, all of the people that it takes to identify and manage the risks are working together. And that helps reduce the handoffs and the delays, which frequently contribute to something that was a risk. Now it's turned into a real problem, and now we have to go through problem resolution in order to continue progressing the program forward. So we frequently see experts in quality management and risk management embedded into each train to facilitate frequent communication and fewer delays in the risk management process. So with that, I know that's a very fast run through 5 of the knowledge areas in the PMBOK and how we treat those in a Lean Agile environment. Rich, why don't you take us now through what are the implications of this for people who've been in project management for a while and how they fit into this picture in organizations that are shifting to a Lean Agile approach?
Thanks, Steve. And so we're going to now go through opportunities there are for project managers. So first, let's just recognize that you all have great skills that you've learned through the PMI. So, for example, leadership, your listening skills, ability to build teams, to motivate teams, communication skills, your ability to influence others, and negotiation. These are all skills that you can leverage as long as you change the mindset from traditional thinking over to agile thinking, in which we try to impart to you today. So with that, we can take those skills and knowledge that you've gained, both from a domain perspective and as well as how to build software and systems, and apply them to critical team roles. So for example, you might be interested in becoming a Scrum Master, and that Scrum Master is a servant leader who helps facilitate team events, is a coach for the team, helps drive lean agile behaviors. Because of your knowledge as domain experts, often becoming a product owner who understands what the customer needs are and acts as the customer proxy for the business is a good role for you to do. Or perhaps you like to do business analyst work, and so you can be a member of the development team, not just as a business analyst, but perhaps you enjoy development or testing or other roles which are involved in developing an increment of software. Now, beyond the team, there are quite a few roles as well. There's the release train engineer, and this is kind of like an agile program manager, and they serve as the chief scrum master for the train. Another role at the program level is product manager. Product managers are responsible for the customer needs. They work very closely with the product owners. Product managers own the vision and product backlog, and they prioritize features using an economic framework. And product managers also help coordinate multiple product owners from different teams on the Agile release train. Many of you who have entered the project management profession were formerly engineers, system architects, leads, team leads, etc. And so you might enjoy becoming a system architect or engineering to help align the teams to a common technical and architectural vision. At the value stream level, so there can be multiple Agile release trains within a value stream. A value stream represents like a product or service. Well, solution managers help coordinate the work across multiple Agile release trains, and therefore they coordinate multiple product managers. Whereas the product manager is responsible for a solution on a train, a solution manager is responsible for solutions which go across trains, which are, again, teams of teams. The value stream engineer is very similar to the release train engineer, except the value stream engineer helps coordinate work across multiple trains, whereas the release train engineer coordinates the work across multiple Agile teams. Besides these roles at the team, program, and value stream, you might consider a role in the PPM team. If you're at the level of being an executive and being able to use your knowledge and skills to how do we advance solutions in our portfolios might be another place for you. Not shown on the framework, but most organizations who have implemented SAFe, or many organizations who implement SAFe, have also implemented an Agile PMO, which follows the Lean Agile principles and practices. So those are two other areas in which you can consider looking at. The good news is that we're seeing SAFe adoption really exponentially increase. It's proven by dozens and dozens of real-world case studies. You can see some of the names here, and there are many more than here. You can go to our framework site and click on the link and look at case studies by the different industries. And besides the private sector, the public sector has picking up SAFe quite a bit as well. Places like the FAA, FBI, the U.S. Post Office, U.S. Patent Office, Department of Justice, and not just in the United States, but throughout Europe as well. And here are a couple examples: the Dutch Tax Authority and the French National Employment Agency, and many, many more. So why are all these organizations adopting SAFe? Well, the reason is because SAFe is getting better business results. And this was what makes Steve and I get up in the morning and do our jobs and really enjoy it. You know, and the first one is having happier, more engaged employees. And when you have happier, more engaged employees, you get much better business results. You get things like increased productivity, 20 to 50% increases in productivity, 30 to 75% increases in time to market, faster time to market, and lower defects by using our built-in quality practices. So the practices that we use, the principles that we use, enable these business results. And these business results didn't come from Steve or I. These come from customer case studies that they submitted to us. So it's their numbers. We didn't calculate anything for them. They did the calculations themselves, and we just summarized these case studies into these results. But these are the 4 areas where SAFe really helps an organization advance. So Andy, I need your help again. We're going to do 2 quick online polls.
Yep, and I think I've managed to fix my my polling issues from the last time, so apologies for that. I'm just going to launch the first one now. You should be seeing that, and this is asking about why you attended. And you can see there's a few different options, so I'll just give everyone a few seconds to comment on that. What do you think we're going to see here, gentlemen?
You weren't hacked by the Russians, were you?
Well, you know, I'd like to just point out that I am in Canada, so I don't think I'm a target of the Russians, but I guess there's a first time for everything. But
yeah, I just was wondering maybe that was the cause of your polling problems.
Yeah, it could well be. I know the Russians are particularly interested in the contents of this webinar, and they're looking to leverage it. So
absolutely.
All right. I'm conscious of time here, so I'm just going to close this this poll down in a couple of seconds. So just final chance to get your comments in. I see a lot of you have voted, so the 20-something% of you that haven't, what's keeping you? All right. I'm going to close this and share the results, which hopefully everybody will see this time. So as you can see, the most popular option, 39%, they wanted to understand the opportunities for project managers in Agile organizations. 26% curious about the scaled Agile framework. 21% saying that the company is interested in adopting SAFe in the future. 12% are seeking new career opportunities to learn and grow. So if you're interested, Rich and Steve, there's 12% of people out there looking for work. And 2% are actually concerned about their job prospects if they don't adapt to Agile, which I guess it's good.
That's very good. Yeah, that's good stuff, Andy. And let me just sort of toss in, we have seen lots and lots of project managers, people that come from this background, make this shift. It's not a bad or hard transition. Really just have to be open-minded and willing to consider new patterns. And if you do that, you'll find this is actually a pretty easy thing to pick up. So that's very encouraging, and I want to share that encouragement with the people that gave those answers.
Thanks, Steve, and I completely echo what you said. All right, I'm going to go to the next one. So we have a second poll about what topics interest you most for a future webinar.
Yep, and that one is live now, and we made it a little bit easier because we're asking people to do 2 polls back to back, so we only gave them 4 choices for this one. And we'll see what people want to come up with. And people are already in voting mode, so they want to keep going as fast as they can on this. We got 40% of people voted already just in the first few seconds. Wow!
Wow,
We've got a lot of I mean, and given how many hundreds of people we've got on, this is impressive results. And the bad news, gentlemen, I think you're going to find is that you're going to have to do a lot of webinars soon. I'm just going to close this and share this.
That's perfectly fine.
And there you go. So you can see that there is a demand for everything. 33% of the guests said the 7 most important lean, agile leadership behaviors, and then pretty even between value streams and DevOps, and 19% still looking for a little bit more on SAFe.
I know for me that's very exciting. My doctorate was actually focused on these leadership behaviors and how it helps affect this change. So I feel a new webinar coming on.
All right, great. So let's move on now to the last part of our webinar, and that's where can you learn more. So first, you can find training available at the scaledagile.com website. Two of our premier courses are Leading Safe, which is aimed at managers and executives who need to learn about SAFe, and we train them before we train the teams. And the other one is Implementing SAFe. So if you're interested in becoming a lean, agile change agent, Implementing SAFe course is the course for you. And the Scaled Agile Framework website is a knowledge base, and the resources are freely available there. So you can read articles, you can download templates, and a whole bunch of stuff. There is no charge for that. We don't take your fingerprints. We don't take retina scans or email addresses. You just go to the website and you can begin your learning journey. We also have several books that we've published. So SAFe Distilled is coming out in a couple of days, and Dean and I recently co-authored that. And another book that we co-authored was on SAFe Reference Guide. So the Distilled is more discusses how you implement SAFe, how to apply the Scaled Agile Framework. The Reference Guide is more of kind of like an encyclopedia, a reference about the entire framework. We've taken the framework and we did a kind of a printout of what's there and organized it. And we also have our Introduction to SAFe, and it's available as a free download. You can read that, and in 20 pages, 25 pages, it provides an in-depth overview of the Scaled Agile Framework. Plus, we have many presentations and free videos to watch. So there's a lot of great knowledge that you can get out there. We also have a SAFe Summit coming up between October 2nd and October 6th. Please sign up at safesummit.com, and you can not only get a chance to learn more about SAFe, but also network with other people who are in similar positions to you, who are looking to implement SAFe, and then hear from the experts, people like Steve and myself, and a whole community of people that will be presenting at the summit. We have a new Release Train Engineer course, and we have a whole role-based curriculum. And we're very proud to say that now we are a registered education provider of the PMI. So we're very excited about that. And as I mentioned, we have a full role-based curriculum. So all the roles that we discussed earlier, there are courses for each of those roles so that you can learn the knowledge and skills to be able to do those jobs effectively. And I think we're just about at the end here, and I think we have a minute or two for questions. Did any questions come up, Andy?
Oh, just a few. So I'm going to ask you one quick question, and while I do that, I'll ask anybody else to get their questions in. Obviously, we're not going to get to them all live, but we will capture every question. We'll make sure that Steve and Rich gets them. So I'll try and get through one very quick question now before I give everyone PDU information. So in 60 seconds or less, gentlemen, Stephanie's asking, more and more teams are working remotely with an outside vendor or in multiple locations. How do you manage the SAFe Agile teams working in a face-to-face environment when you don't have those co-located teams?
Rich, you want me to jump on that since I did one last week? So what we do is we recommend our customers leverage the technologies that are actually pretty inexpensive and very widely available in today's technological environment.
I'm not sure what you said.
Using, sorry about that. I'll try to be more clear. So things like video casting. We just did a launch of a train and training across 5 countries globally simultaneously, and it worked very well. And then day-to-day, team-to-team interactions can be easily facilitated with, things like IM and live video and things that are like that are available. And it actually works fairly well. And I would say the majority of our customers are actually globally distributed customers and doing it pretty effectively. Rich, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we want to keep teams together as much as possible. So and our teams normally are 7 to 9 individuals, so as much as possible to keep each individual team together. And we have a Agile Release Train, a team of teams, having teams which are distributed. We have many ways of dealing with that, as what you mentioned, Steve, and of course our PI planning that is done either face-to-face or having some teams who are remote join those planning sessions remotely, as well as having other events which we allow sync-ups to occur throughout the entire program increment to help that collaboration occur.
All right, perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. So we are right at the top of the hour. I promised everybody some PDU information. This will be a self-reported PDU, so you can go to the regular part on the PMI website. You'll do your self-reporting, and this is eligible for a PDU in the strategic category, on the strategy category. And all that information will be in the email that comes out within 24 hours of the close of this, which will let you know how to access the recording, how to access the slides, and we'll repeat that PDU information. So the only thing left for me to do is to very sincerely thank Steve and Rich, and most importantly to thank the hundreds and hundreds of you who attended. We really very much appreciate it, and we hope to see you again in another webinar soon. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone.